Laura and Ethan's secret meetings had begun as innocent nostalgia, but what started with stolen glances and whispered promises would spiral into a deadly obsession that tore apart a quiet suburban life and ended in horrific murder. Laura and Daniel had built a life that many would call perfect. Their home sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac in a picturesque suburban neighborhood, where children rode bicycles along the sidewalks and neighbors waved from manicured lawns. To the outside world, they were the ideal couple. Successful careers, social gatherings filled with laughter, and a house that was always tidy and welcoming. Daniel, with his charming personality and confident demeanor, seemed like the perfect husband. Laura appeared to be the devoted wife, someone who managed the household with grace and efficiency, always smiling, always composed. Every detail of their lives suggested harmony, but behind the closed doors there were fissures no one could see. Laura's life, despite appearances, was quietly complicated. She spent long hours at work, often leaving before dawn and returning after dark, though she always had plausible excuses ready for Daniel or anyone else who asked. The neighbors never questioned her absence because her career was demanding, and Daniel often assumed she was simply overworked. But in reality, Laura's mind was rarely on her job. There were moments when she felt a growing emptiness, a sense that something was missing despite the life she had carefully built. She would go on long walks in the evenings, wandering through familiar streets, her mind caught between memories of the past and an unspoken yearning for something lost. It was during one of these walks that fate intervened. Laura spotted a familiar face among the crowd at the local cafe, a man she had not seen in years. Ethan, her high school sweetheart, had returned to town. He was older now, more composed, yet he carried the same intensity in his gaze that had once captured her heart. Their eyes met, and for a brief moment, the years melted away. What began as a simple greeting turned into a conversation, filled with polite nostalgia that soon deepened into personal sharing. Laura felt a spark she had thought was long extinguished. Their chance encounter rekindled emotions that she had buried under years of routine, and before she fully realized it, she was agreeing to meet him again, away from prying eyes. At first, these meetings were casual, almost innocent. They talked about old friends, the changes in their town, and memories of youth. But over time, the encounters became more frequent and secretive. Laura found Ferdig sneaking out in the evenings, inventing reasons for her absence. The thrill of secrecy mixed with guilt, creating a tension she could not escape. Ethan, too, seemed consumed by their renewed connection. He was eager, persistent, and increasingly insistent that Laura spend more time with him. The thrill of the forbidden drew her in, even as she told herself it was just a harmless indulgence. As the weeks passed, Laura's dual life began to take a toll. She struggled to maintain her composure at home, masking her emotional turmoil behind polite smiles and casual conversations. Daniel noticed subtle changes: the distracted way she moved through the house, the way she avoided his gaze, and the increased frequency with which she checked her phone. He had no proof of anything, but a small seed of suspicion began to grow. He dismissed it as stress, overthinking, or exhaustion, never imagining that the past could reach into their present with such intensity. Meanwhile, Ethan's influence over Laura grew stronger. He became the center of her emotional world, a secret companion who knew her innermost thoughts and desires. Every meeting with him left her both exhilarated and anxious, caught between the excitement of rediscovered love and the fear of what might happen if Daniel ever discovered the truth. She found herself living two lives, one visible to the world, safe and orderly, and another hidden, reckless and consuming. The tension between these two existences began to weigh heavily on her, creating a nervous energy that she could not shake. The danger in Laura's situation was not immediately apparent. At first it seemed like a harmless dalliance, an emotional escape from the routines of married life. But the more she interacted with Ethan, the more she realized that he was not content with mere companionship. He wanted a complete claim over her, a dominance that blurred boundaries and disregarded consequences. His desire for her, mixed with possessiveness and a touch of obsession, began to shape his actions, making the situation increasingly unstable. As the days turned into weeks, the risk of discovery grew. Laura knew she was walking a fine line, yet the pull of the past, combined with the allure of forbidden love, kept her returning to him. She could feel the storm approaching, but had no idea how violently it would strike. The quiet suburban streets, the familiar faces of neighbors, and the illusion of a perfect life could not shield her from the consequences of her choices. The cracks that had begun as mere whispers of dissatisfaction were widening, and the lives of all three people, Laura, Daniel, and Ethan, were about to be changed forever. Ethan's presence in Laura's life became impossible to ignore. What had begun as a series of casual, nostalgic meetings evolved into something far more consuming. He was relentless, appearing at unexpected times, sending messages that were impossible to ignore, leaving little reminders of his presence everywhere she went. Every day Laura found herself thinking about him, her mind looping through every memory, every fleeting touch from years ago. The thrill of the secret affair was intoxicating, but with it came an undercurrent of fear she could not shake. The man she had once loved was no longer the boy she remembered. Ethan had grown darker, more intense, and increasingly possessive. Laura's emotions became a tangled web of excitement and guilt. She loved her husband in the way she always had, but with Ethan she felt a connection that was urgent and consuming. The two lives she was living pulled her in opposite directions, creating a tension that gnawed at her constantly. Daniel noticed the changes too. She was quieter at times, restless at others, often lost in thought. He tried to bridge the growing distance, arranging dinners, planning small trips, attempting to rekindle the closeness they had once shared, but Laura's mind was elsewhere, always partially caught in Ethan's orbit. Ethan, for his part, was becoming dangerous. His desire for control over Laura intensified with every secret meeting. He began to demand more of her time, more of her loyalty, and more proof that she was truly committed to him. Gifts and notes were no longer enough. He wanted declarations, promises, and assurances that she could not give without betraying her husband. Each refusal, however gentle, seemed to ignite a spark of anger within him. He was a man used to getting what he wanted, and Laura was beginning to realize that his obsession could turn violent. The pressure of maintaining the double life began to take its toll on Laura. She lived in a constant state of anxiety, never knowing when Ethan might appear uninvited, when her lies might be discovered, or when Daniel might see through the cracks she was struggling to hide. Simple routines became exhausting. Walking through the grocery store, answering phone calls, or even sitting at the dinner table required calculated composure. Every small interaction was a reminder of the precarious balance she had created, and every misstep could lead to disaster. As the weeks turned into months, Laura began to recognize the dangerous path she had entered. Ethan's intensity was not limited to romantic pursuit. It had become an all-consuming obsession. He monitored her movements, demanded explanations for delays, and subtly manipulated her emotions to ensure that she remained under his influence. Laura, who had once believed in the purity of their connection, began to fear the man she had allowed back into her life. His charm, once familiar and comforting, now carried a threatening edge. The excitement she had felt at seeing him again had been replaced by a simmering unease that she could no longer ignore. Daniel's suspicion grew as well. Although he had no concrete evidence, he began noticing patterns in Laura's behavior, unexpected absences, vague explanations, and the way she guarded her phone like a precious secret. The man he had trusted completely was becoming a stranger before his eyes, and though he could not name the threat, he felt its presence. The tension between them was subtle but pervasive, an invisible force that stretched their once happy life thin. Ethan's obsession reached a climax when he realized that Laura would not leave her husband. Anger and frustration boiled over into dark fantasies and dangerous plans. He began imagining ways to remove the obstacle standing between them, rationalizing extreme measures in his mind. The love he claimed to feel had become inseparable from possessiveness, jealousy, and a willingness to cross moral boundaries. Laura's attempts to maintain boundaries only fueled his fixation, intensifying the emotional storm surrounding them. Laura felt trapped. She was caught between the safety and familiarity of Daniel and the irresistible, destructive pull of Ethan. Every choice seemed fraught with danger, and the illusion of control she once held over her life was slipping away. She became acutely aware that one wrong move could trigger consequences she could not reverse. The secret affair, once thrilling, had become a precarious dance on the edge of disaster. Unbeknownst to Daniel, the perfect suburban life he believed he shared with his wife was rapidly unraveling. The streets that once symbolized comfort and stability now held the shadows of secrets, lies, and a growing threat. Laura, and Ethan's entangled lives were heading toward an inevitable collision, and the tension that had been building silently beneath the surface was about to erupt in a way that no one could predict. What had started as a rekindled romance was evolving into a dangerous obsession that would soon set the stage for tragedy. The evening had begun quietly, as if the world itself had no idea of the storm about to descend. Laura left the house under the pretense of visiting a friend, careful to avoid raising any suspicion with Daniel. She carried a small bag, the contents minimal but deliberate, a change of clothes, her phone and a few personal items she felt she might need. Every step she took toward the secluded cabin outside town was weighted with tension, her mind racing through the consequences of what she was about to do. The streets of her suburban neighborhood were calm, children's toys left in yards, streetlights casting long shadows, yet in her heart fear and excitement battled relentlessly. Ethan was already at the cabin when she arrived, pacing nervously near the entrance. His intensity was palpable, and the sight of him both thrilled and terrified her. He had insisted that this meeting be private, away from any chance of interruption, and Laura felt the gravity of the decision she had made to be there. She had walked this path countless times in her mind, imagining the conversations, the confessions, the fleeting moments of closeness, but reality was far more charged, far more dangerous than she had anticipated. The air inside the cabin was thick with tension from the moment she stepped through the door. Ethan's gaze was fixed on her, unyielding, demanding, and for a brief moment she felt an almost physical weight pressing against her chest. She realized with chilling clarity that this was not a simple reunion. It was a reckoning. Ethan had allowed himself to become consumed by jealousy, desire and the need for control, and Laura was caught in the middle, the center of a storm that had been quietly building for weeks. They moved through the cabin cautiously, circling one another in a ritual that was both intimate and fraught with danger. Ethan's voice, when it came, was low but insistent, his words carrying a force that made it clear he would not be denied. Laura tried to reason with him, to explain that she could not leave her husband, that their lives were separate, that she could not fulfill the obsessive expectations he had placed upon her. Her words, measured and deliberate, only seemed to inflame him further. Each refusal, each attempt at calm became a spark in a volatile mix of emotion and rage. What followed was sudden, violent, and terrifying. Ethan's anger erupted like a dam breaking, a force that swept away all caution and reason. He lunged, striking out in a frenzy of frustration and jealousy. Laura stumbled, desperate to escape, but the cabin offered no easy routes of flight. Panic surged through her veins, sharpening every sense. The room became a blur of movement, objects toppling, furniture scraping against the floor, and the sound of her own frantic breathing echoing in the small space. Fear was a constant companion as Ethan's intensity reached its peak. Every moment was a struggle, a battle for survival that seemed impossibly close to slipping from her control. Laura's heart pounded, and though she to reason with him, to calm the tempest, Ethan was beyond listening. He was consumed entirely by his own rage, his desire and the obsession that had grown unchecked over weeks of secret meetings. What had once been a rekindled romance had mutated into something monstrous, a dangerous force neither could fully manage. The attack was merciless and swift. By the time the night was over, Laura lay motionless, her life extinguished in the very place that had once been meant for reunion and whispered memories. The violence had left its mark not only on her body but on the space itself. The cabin, once a quiet refuge, was now a scene of horror and tragedy. Ethan, realizing the magnitude of his actions, fled into the night, leaving behind only chaos and a trail of evidence that would soon lead authorities to him. When the authorities were finally alerted, the scene they encountered was shocking. The cabin, secluded and once serene, was transformed into a testament of human obsession and destructive desire. Investigators carefully documented every detail, every object occulted, and every trace of struggle. They began to piece together the events that had led to such a horrific end, tracing back through weeks of secret meetings, obsessive messages, and escalating tensions. The picture that emerged was one of a passionate but dangerous relationship that had spiraled beyond control, fueled by desire, jealousy, and unchecked obsession. The neighborhood and wider community were stunned. Laura's murder shattered the illusion of suburban tranquility, revealing the hidden complexities and dangers that could exist behind closed doors. The perfect life she had once led, the facade of domestic bliss, was now gone, leaving only a haunting reminder of what passion and secrecy could unleash. Families whispered, friends speculated, and the once quiet streets seemed to carry the weight of unspoken horror. As investigators worked tirelessly to track down Ethan, the story became a chilling reminder that love, when twisted by obsession and possessiveness, could turn deadly. The night that had begun with a secret reunion ended in unimaginable tragedy, forever changing the lives of everyone involved and leaving an indelible mark on the community. The investigation began immediately after authorities were called to the cabin. Police officers combed through the scene with meticulous care, documenting every detail and collecting evidence that might explain how a quiet suburban life had been shattered in such a violent way. The cabin, once a place of tranquility and secrecy, had become a chilling tableau of human obsession and rage. Every object displaced, every trace of struggle, told part of the story, but the motive behind the murder remained unclear. Detectives quickly realized that this was not a random act of violence, it was personal, deliberate, and fueled by a complex mix of emotion and obsession. Daniel was one of the first people to be interviewed. He appeared calm on the surface, but his grief was palpable. To the outside world, he had seemed to have the perfect marriage, yet now he faced the impossible reality that his wife had been leading a secret life. He spoke about Laura with a quiet reverence, describing her as loving, devoted, and meticulous, someone who had always maintained the appearance of domestic perfection. Yet the investigators noticed subtle signs of unease, moments when Daniel hesitated or seemed unsure of details he should have known. It became clear that Laura had been hiding something significant, something that had ultimately led to her death. As the detectives dug deeper, the evidence of Laura's secret affair began to emerge. Messages on her phone, deleted emails, and records of unexplained meetings painted a picture of a relationship that had been carefully concealed. Each piece of information revealed a deeper layer of the story, showing how Laura had been drawn back into the orbit of Ethan, the man she had once loved. What had seemed like harmless nostalgia turned out to be a dangerous emotional entanglement, one that had escalated into obsession and ultimately violence. Ethan's role in the murder became increasingly clear. Forensic evidence placed him at the scene, and investigators discovered traces of a struggle that matched the timeline of his meetings with Laura. Witnesses recalled seeing a man matching his description near the cabin in the days leading up to the murder. Even before his capture, it was evident that Ethan's obsession had driven him to commit an act of extreme violence. The authorities began piecing together his mindset, realizing that his jealousy and desire for control over Laura had pushed him to a breaking point. The investigation revealed the intensity of Ethan's fixation. Friends and acquaintances described him as passionate but controlling, someone who could become consumed by jealousy and possessiveness. Combined with Laura's attempts to maintain boundaries, this created a volatile mix that had finally exploded into tragedy. Each meeting between them had added another layer to the tension, and the final confrontation at the cabin had been the inevitable outcome of weeks of emotional escalation. Daniel struggled to comprehend the revelations. The man he thought he knew, the quiet and distant Laura he had shared his life with, had been involved in a secret world he never imagined. He wrestled with feelings of betrayal, grief, and helplessness, realizing that no amount of love or devotion could have prevented what had happened. His life, once predictable and orderly, was now marked by loss and a haunting understanding of how quickly obsession could turn deadly. Investigators also uncovered details about Ethan's planning in the days leading up to the murder. He had studied Laura's routine, anticipated Daniel's absences, and chosen the cabin for its seclusion. Everything about the night of the crime was premeditated, underscoring the deliberate nature of his actions. The meticulous collection of evidence, from fingerprints to footprints, built a comprehensive picture that left little room for doubt about his culpability. The community, meanwhile, struggled to come to terms with the tragedy. Neighbors whispered about the quiet couple whose perfect lives had been shattered. Families who once admired Laura and Daniel now looked at their own relationships with a mixture of caution and fear, wondering what secrets might be hidden behind closed doors. The incident became a cautionary tale, a chilling reminder that appearances could be deceiving and that obsession left unchecked could lead to devastating consequences. As the investigation progressed, law enforcement coordinated efforts to track down Ethan. His disappearance raised alarm, and a nationwide search began. Detectives worked tirelessly, following every lead, analyzing every piece of evidence, and speaking to anyone who might shed light on his whereabouts. The pressure was immense, and the urgency palpable. Capturing Ethan became not only a matter of justice for Laura, but also a race to prevent further violence, as his obsession and unpredictability made him a continuing threat. The weeks of investigation culminated in a comprehensive case that revealed the hidden complexities of Laura's life, Ethan's dangerous obsession, and the forces that had led to the fatal night. The story that had begun as a secret affair had unfolded into a shocking narrative of jealousy, passion, and violence, exposing the dark undercurrents that can exist beneath the surface of ordinary lives. The day Ethan was finally captured marked the beginning of the long road to justice. After weeks of investigation, tips from concerned citizens, and tireless efforts by law enforcement, he was located in a neighboring town, hiding in a rundown motel. The arrest was swift and precise. Officers approached quietly, surrounding the building, and within moments, Ethan was in handcuffs, his eyes wide with a mixture of defiance and disbelief. The moment was surreal for those who had followed the case closely. The man who had caused so much pain was now in custody, and the process of holding him accountable could finally begin. Daniel attended the initial court hearings, his grief still raw and unrelenting. Sitting in the courtroom, he watched as evidence was presented, detailing the chain of events that had led to Laura's death. The jury was shown messages between Laura and Ethan, recordings of her attempts to maintain boundaries, and forensic evidence from the cabin that left no doubt about what had transpired. Every detail was examined meticulously, and the emotional weight of the evidence was impossible to ignore. Daniel's sorrow was compounded by the shocking realization of just how secretive Laura's life had been in her final weeks. Ethan's demeanor in court oscillated between arrogance and feigned remorse. At times he appeared cold, unrepentant, as though the gravity of his actions had yet to fully reach him. Other times his expression betrayed a hint of the obsession that had fueled the crime, a mixture of longing, jealousy, and frustration that had grown unchecked until it exploded into violence. The jury witnessed a man whose desire to control another human being had overridden any sense of morality, and the story unfolded like a cautionary tale of passion gone horribly wrong. The prosecution laid out a clear narrative. They painted Ethan as a man consumed by obsession, whose inability to accept Laura's boundaries had led directly to murder. They described the meticulous planning, the escalating emotional tension, and the final confrontation at the cabin. Each piece of evidence reinforced the notion that this was not a crime of impulse, but one born of deliberate intent. The chilling reality was that love, when twisted by possessiveness and jealousy, had become deadly. Daniel, though devastated, found a small measure of solace in the process. Watching Ethan face the consequences of his actions provided a sense of justice, even if it could never bring Laura back. He reflected on the life they had shared, the quiet moments that had once felt ordinary but now carried the weight of memory and loss. Though anger and grief coexisted, he began to understand the importance of closure and accountability, and the court proceedings became a step toward reclaiming some control over a life that had been upended by tragedy. The trial was intense, lasting several weeks. Witnesses testified about Ethan's obsession, the frequency of the secret meetings, and the signs that had gone unnoticed by those around him. Investigators recounted the meticulous work that led to his capture, painting a picture of a man who had carefully hidden his intentions until it was too late. The courtroom became a stage for the complex interplay of love, secrecy, obsession, and violence, a story that captured the attention of the community and drew nationwide interest. When the verdict was finally delivered, Ethan was found guilty of murder in the first degree. The sentence was life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The decision provided a measure of closure for Daniel and the family of Laura, though the wound left by her death would never fully heal. The courtroom emptied slowly, the weight of the case lingering in the air like a heavy fog, leaving all who had followed it to contemplate the dangerous consequences of secrecy and obsession. In the weeks and months following the trial, Daniel returned to his daily life, forever changed by the events that had unfolded. The house they had once shared felt emptier, the streets of the suburban neighborhood quieter, haunted by memories of a love that had turned lethal. Friends and neighbors offered support, but the underlying lesson was impossible to ignore. Appearances could be deceiving, and the hidden forces of desire and obsession could erupt with devastating consequences. Laura's story, though tragic, became a cautionary tale that resonated far beyond the confines of her neighborhood. The narrative of a secret affair that escalated into murder was retold in articles, on social media, and eventually in documentaries. each retelling reinforcing the danger of unchecked passion and possessiveness. Daniel, while grieving, sought to honor Laura's memory by advocating for awareness about the signs of toxic obsession and the importance of transparency in relationships. The quiet suburban streets that had once symbolized safety and stability were forever marked by the events that had taken place. Laura's life, taken too soon, became a reminder that the seemingly ordinary can conceal extraordinary darkness. Ethan's obsession and actions left a permanent scar on the community, but through the lens of justice, reflection, and awareness, the story served as both a warning and a memorial, a testament to the tragic consequences when love is consumed by control and secrecy.